Welcome back to Shoot Spade, and today's ship will be HMS Arethusa. HMS Arethusa is a rank 3 British light cruiser. It being a light cruiser, it is armed with 3 dual mounts of 6-inch guns, or 152mm. These guns get an ammo selection of semi-armor piercing, high explosive variable time fuse, and high explosive time fuse shells. I recommend using semi-armor piercing as the main shell type, with some HEVT spare to deal with the annoying coastal vessel or the pesky aircraft. The reload rate of this armament can vary between 9.75 and 7.5 seconds. This is an alright reload rate for a gun at this battle rating, definitely more than competitive enough. The turrets themselves, however, are kind of bad, with only an inch of armor at the most, or 25mm, and with a turret reverse speed of 6 to 7 degrees a second. Not too bad, but it's noticeable. All in all, it's a standard armament for a 5.3 cruiser. The lack of proper armor piercing shells, however, does make it a bit difficult to deal with the tougher targets. And the shell velocity on the semi-armor piercing also feels rather low, so long-range engagements are not really your wheelhouse. As for secondary armament, the Arethusa carries 4 dual 4-inch guns or 102mm guns. These guns carry the same ammunition types, but seeing as these are your secondary armament, I would highly recommend you mainly take the HEVT shells with a few sap rounds in case you need them. The reload rate of this gun can vary between 3.9 and 3 seconds, a very high fire rate and most certainly good enough for anti-air use. The gun protection, however, is rather poor, being just open gun shields. And their turret reverse is also not the greatest for anti-air guns, being the same as your main gun armament, at 6 to 7 degrees a second depending on your modifications. Thanks to having VT shells and a high rate of fire, these guns do serve as decent long-range anti-air guns. And with the SAP and high rate of fire again, can serve as decent secondary weaponry as well. But do note that the slow traverse speed and the fact that they're open gun mounts may lead to more downtime on these guns than you would like. But now onto the anti-air armament. 2 quadruple 40mm Bofor mounts, 5 single 20mm mounts, and 4 dual 20mm rounds. This is quite a heavy anti-air suite for the battle rating, and would suffice for most aerial threats you'll face. Just beware of the blind spots of the Bofor mounts, which are positioned between the funnels, one on each side of the ship, meaning that their firing arcs can be rather restrictive towards the front and rear of the vessel. Then we go on to the explosive armament. 2 triple launchers of 533mm torpedoes. These are wing-mounted just below the deck, with decent forward firing arcs and very good rear firing arcs. These torpedoes carry a warhead of 305 kg of TNT equivalent, and can go either 74 km an hour for 4.57 km, or 46 km an hour for 12.34 km, depending on the torpedo mode modification of course. In this case, I'm a bit conflicted. It rather depends on what you would actually want to use the torpedoes for. If you want to use them as actual self-defense weapons in close-range engagements, do not take the torpedo mode modification. If you're more thinking of using them against stuff like AI targets on the convoy maps, maybe you want to use the torpedo mode modification, but that's up to you. All in all, the torpedoes are not all that useful in an offensive role, being that there's so few of them on either side of the ship. However, with their decent reverse arcs, they will be very useful in a close-range brawl. Then we get to mobility. Its speed is a little bit disappointing, stock going 49 km an hour, and spaded only going 57 km an hour. There are quite a few ships out there faster than it, but it's not painfully slow either. The Arethusa is also rather agile, meaning that the Arethusa can also take rather sharp turns. Now, survivability. For British cruisers, you'll see this trend often, and that is that their survivability is rather poor. The Citadel, or the armoured belt, is only 2¼ inch thick, or around about 57mm. This won't stop anything really, other than high explosive shells and maybe some poorer quality semi-armor piercing shells. The magazines have a little bit more protection with 3 inches tops, or 76mm, and as stated before, the turrets only have 1 inch or 25mm of armor. The Arethusa, much like other British cruisers, is a rather large target, with unprotected crew compartments, big engines, and an unarmoured bridge, which believe me, you will become painfully aware of during battles. One saving grace though of the Arethusa is that its ammunition is well below the waterline, so you shouldn't fear detonations too much. When it comes to playstyle, the Arethusa is a true battle rating 5.3 light cruiser. You are not the mainline unit of your team unless in a full down tier. And even then, there are other 5.3 cruisers that will outshine you. I am not looking at you, Atlanta. We all know what you did. The rate of fire is competitive enough, but not good enough when fighting some of the more dangerous destroyers, especially since you don't have the armor to shrug off their firepower. Use hard cover as much as possible, as Arethusa does not like being under fire. You do have a very potent anti-air capability. Even if your anti-air were to not shoot down an aircraft, the sheer number of tracers you can throw in the sky might deter them from trying to strike you. But that does not save the Arethusa from being at the whims of matchmaking. Keep that in mind and adapt to it. To summarize, the firepower is mediocre, but decent rate of fire. Lack of an actual armor-piercing shell means that it cannot really deal with armored targets, and the shells do feel rather floaty. Anti-air is very good, probably among the top of its class at 5.3. As for torpedoes, I can't really give it a good score. The torpedoes themselves are not the worst per se, but it doesn't really mix well with the Arethusa's playstyle. Mobility-wise is alright, even good. It's agile but not particularly fast. Survivability is sadly poor. There's next to no meaningful armor, but ammo at least is safely below the waterline. Playstyle: opportunistic support vessel. Verdict: consider it. It is not a particularly bad ship, but it struggles a bit. Having played it during a naval event probably didn't help much, but Arethusa is very much at the whims of the matchmaker, as it cannot deal well with heavy armor. Of the British 5.3 cruisers, it is probably one of the weaker surface combatants. Anyways, that is my review of HMS Arethusa. I hope you enjoyed the video and the slight change to the format of it, and I'll see you again relatively soon.